Welcome back. And now for the news in detail. We start our news bulletin with a sad and unfortunate incident in Pakistan. At least 73 people have been killed and over 40 others injured after a train caught fire near the southern city of Rahim Yar Khan. Police say a gas cylinder on board the Tezgam Express exploded en route from Karachi to Rawalpindi. However, Pakistan Railways officials say the cause is still being investigated. Railways officials say the explosion destroyed 3 of the train's passenger carriages. They say passengers were cooking breakfast on board using the gas cylinder. When it exploded after the blast, several carriages caught fire and have been decoupled from the train. Railways Minister Sheikh Rashid says firefighting and rescue operations are underway. Indian government has divided occupied Jammu and Kashmir into 2 federal territories today, despite opposition by Kashmiris. Kashmiris say Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government is forcing this measure to dilute the valley's Muslim majority. Last night, Indian Home Ministry announced the region has been annexed as 2 union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. For the last 88 days, the valley is cut off from the rest of the world with a shortage of food and healthcare as it faces a humanitarian crisis. For more on this, we are joined by our correspondent, Jagruti Deva from New Delhi. Jagruti, thank you. What is the situation on the ground?
The situation on the ground is tense, as you can imagine. Since the Articles 370 was revoked in August, there's been a communications shutdown. Schools and businesses and shops have all been closed, and there was a real comms blackout at the time. A lot of this still remains. There have been street protests, so it is one of tension. There is expectations that there will be continued protest amongst those who have an unfavourable opinion of this move that's been made. So this is one to watch out for, of continued tensions in the region.
Jagruti, the members of the European Parliament recently visited the region. So can you tell us a little bit about their reaction on the situation in the occupied valley?
Yes, so part of the tensions in the region and the opinion on the situation in Kashmir is to do with this visit from these 23 MEPs, parliamentarians from the European Union, who were the first foreign officials to visit the region. This was not an official EU visit. The EU had said they were there in their personal capacity. And there was a lot of criticism of their visit for a variety of reasons. One of those was that majority of them were seen to come from right-wing parties or even far-right parties, and that they were foreign visitors who were allowed to visit the region, whilst Indian opposition parliamentarians were not. There were also people who didn't go on the visit because they didn't feel comfortable about the trip itself. They thought that for the issues that were raised, that this was a stage-managed visit, that the MPs would be shown what they wanted to be seen rather than the real situation on the ground, as it were. That was one allegation, which meant that a few MPs dropped out of the visit. So again, a mixed reaction from this group and a mixed reaction to the visit itself.
Jagruti Deva, our correspondent from New Delhi, telling us about the latest situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Now moving on, a Pentagon report has revealed the US conducted over 1,100 airstrikes in Afghanistan in September. The report says American forces conducted 40 airstrikes a day last month. The report said over 800 strikes were conducted in August, while over 500 were launched in July. US forces in Afghanistan have not reported the number and the types of aircraft or the bombs dropped in each strike. Washington says the strikes continue to apply judicious military pressure on the Taliban. The Human Rights Watch says CIA-backed forces are committing illegal executions and other human rights abuses with impunity. In a report, the international rights body said the forces are killing civilians during botched night raids. The report said in many cases, the raids were accompanied by airstrikes, killing civilians indiscriminately or disproportionately. The report also highlights 14 instances of serious war crimes by CIA-backed strike groups from late 2017 to mid-2019. It said sometimes troops detained men and didn't tell their families where they were being held. The report said these forces are involved in serious violations of the laws of war, some amounting to war crimes in every Afghan province. South Korea claims North Korea has fired 2 projectiles into the sea between the Korean peninsula and Japan. In a statement, South Korea's military said the weapons were launched from the South Pyongan province eastward into the sea. Japan's Coast Guard said that the projectiles appear to be missiles and landed outside Japan's exclusive economic zone. It is the 12th time that the nuclear-armed North has carried out a major weapons test this year. The last test by Pyongyang was a submarine-launched ballistic missile fired from a platform in the sea on October the 2nd. The launch comes in the midst of a deadlock on nuclear talks between South Korea and the US. China says discussions with the US on reaching a trade agreement are going well. The Commerce Ministry says Beijing and Washington have decided to take the process further. The ministry says trade negotiators from both the countries will hold their round of telephone negotiations on Friday. Earlier, the US said it will consider extending tariff exclusions on $34 billion worth of Chinese imports. President Donald Trump has previously hinted at the possibility of an agreement with Chinese President Xi Jinping at a summit in November. But the summit's cancellation because of continuing mass protests in the host nation, Chile, has raised new barriers to the talks. U.S. House committees have asked former White House National Security Advisor John Bolton to testify in their impeachment inquiry. The Democratic-led investigation into President Trump has set November 7 as the date for Bolton's appearance. Bolton's attorney, Charles Cooper, says his client will not appear without a subpoena. The rush of possible new witnesses comes as the House prepares to take its first official vote on continuing the probe today. This will include public hearings and the possibility of drafting articles of impeachment against the president. Trump has dismissed the Democrat-led impeachment probe as a witch hunt and a lynching. In Mongolia, police in the capital of Ulaanbaatar have arrested 800 Chinese citizens in Provianto, a cybercrime ring. Officials say they have also confiscated hundreds of computers and SIM cards. Head of the General Intelligence Agency of Mongolia, Jebel Jorpalam, said they raided 4 locations after 2 months of investigation. He said the detained individuals were involved in illegal gambling, fraud, computer hacking, identity theft, and money laundering. All of the 800 Chinese citizens in detention arrived in Mongolia on 30-day tourist visas. In a statement, the Chinese embassy in the capital said it will cooperate with the Mongolian police. In Geneva, rival sides in Syria's long-running civil war have met face-to-face for the first time to work out a new governing agreement. The meeting of 150 government and opposition delegates is their first Constitutional Committee meeting. UN Special Envoy on Syria, Geir Pedersen, said the constitution is the first step towards a political process, but he said no senior members of the government or the opposition are part of the committee. He said the process will lead to UN-supervised elections under Resolution 2254. The envoy said the process will be Syrian-led and Syrian-owned. NATO has told Russia to withdraw all of its troops from eastern Ukraine's Donbas region after Kiev's forces pulled out. Praising Ukraine's move, NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg said some Moscow-backed troops are in the region. Stoltenberg says the withdrawal will help reduce tensions between the two countries. He says after the withdrawal, Ukraine and Russia will be able to solve the conflict peacefully. But he says here is a long way to go before that happens.
But of course, NATO also states very clearly that Russia has a special responsibility to implement the Minsk agreements and that they must withdraw all their troops, all their officers from eastern Ukraine and stop destabilizing eastern Ukraine.
Hungary says it will help stabilize Russian relations with the EU and NATO. During his meeting with President Putin, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban pledged to play the role of a mediator. He said Hungary's cooperation with Russia was a win for all, including the EU and NATO. Orban said his country's geographic position makes cooperation with the larger powers unavoidable. During the meeting, Orban signed bilateral agreements and said Hungary will continue to boost ties with Moscow.
Hungary is a NATO and EU member and will stay so. But that does not exclude that in certain questions we engage in cooperation with Russia. That's what we endeavor to do and will continue to do.
In Spain, hundreds of students have set up a protest camp in Barcelona over the jailing of Catalan separatist leaders. Protesters are demanding a second vote on the region's independence. Catalan's 7 public universities have also condemned the sentencing and called for the immediate release of the separatist leaders. Protests have rocked the region since Catalan separatist leaders were jailed on October the 14th for their role in the 2017 independence referendum. Over 200 people were injured in the violent protests. Spain's main parties have consistently rejected any moves towards Catalonia's secession. The UN has suspended Ebola screenings in South Sudan after 3 of its aid workers were killed during clashes. The International Organization for Migrants, the IOM, has halted operations at 5 border posts. In a statement, the organization said its volunteers were caught in crossfire during clashes in South Sudan's central Equatoria region. It said 2 other volunteers suffered injuries and are recovering from the gunshot wounds. IOM Director General Antonio Vitorino said humanitarians and civilians should never suffer due to such acts of violence. The recent Ebola outbreak in the Congo has killed over 2,000 people since August 2018. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned with Indus News. Welcome back. In Zimbabwe, women are revolutionizing the way the world looks at conservation through a unique all-female anti-poaching unit. The foundation, Akashinga, meaning brave ones, has been training vulnerable women from local villages to become elite game rangers since 2017. This report has more.
This is Hell Week, a brutal physical and mental challenge designed to leave only the best game rangers standing. Among this strictly female group is Chiavetso Motero. Married at a young age, she moved with her husband and small child to South Africa, where she was physically abused by her mother-in-law. Chiavetso eventually returned to rural Zimbabwe with very few prospects.
My husband is in South Africa now. She don't even sending money for the child. I'm going to take care. They took my documents. I'm here to empower myself to take care of my child.
The 22-year-old is one of 160 women picked from an initial 500 to take part in the Ranger selections. Ultimately, only around 80 will make it into the ranks of the Wildlife Rangers, known as the Akashinga or the Brave One. The initiative in northern Zimbabwe is run by the International Anti-Poaching Foundation, created in 2009 by Australian sniper Damien Mander.
What we've found with this program is the women's ability to naturally de-escalate tension and work with the communities that they come from. We're not having a war with the local community, and the government hasn't had to make a choice between conservation or communities. And in so many ways, women have become the bridge that conservation had to build into these communities.
In the 16 years before the program was launched, 8,000 elephants were killed in this area. Since the Rangers' arrival 2 years ago, elephant poaching has dropped by 80%. In this time, the women made 115 arrests without a single shot fired.
A powerful 6.5 magnitude earthquake has struck the southern Philippines. So far, there have been no reports of casualties. The U.S. Geological Survey says the quake hit Mindanao Island, where a strong tremor killed 6 people earlier this month. The quake's epicenter was located in Cotabato province, west of the city of Davao. It is the 3rd quake to strike Mindanao Island this month. Twitter says it will ban all political advertisements on its platform. CEO Jack Dorsey says he has come to believe political reach should be earned and not bought. Dorsey says he has realized paying for reach on Twitter and Facebook has significant ramifications for civil discourse. He said it also gives advertisers an unfair advantage and helps to proliferate targeted and misleading messages. Twitter's policy on the new ban will be implemented on November 22nd. Meanwhile, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has defended his company's political adverts policy, calling it freedom of expression. The Great Jackolantern Blaze has become one of the largest Halloween events in the U.S. New York's Hudson Valley is hosting the historic show to mark this year's Halloween. This report has more. The Great Jackolantern Blaze, now in its 15th year, is a Halloween extravaganza. It features more than 7,000 illuminated jack-o'-lanterns, all designed and hand-carved by artisans.
And as you can see, it's not just individual triangle eyes pumpkins. It is very elaborate displays, including a working carousel, including dinosaurs, the Statue of Liberty, planetarium. There's a whole bunch of really cool stuff going on.
Organizers estimate the event will host 180,000 visitors this year. New to the Great Jack-o'-lantern Blaze is an immersive display of the Headless Horseman Bridge.
The Headless Horseman Bridge is an installation at the Great Jackolantern Blaze, and it's an homage to the fact that this is the 200th anniversary of the publication of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, the very famous ghost story written by Washington Irving.
The event runs through the 30th of November. Most Asian stocks have risen in early trading over the U.S. Federal Reserve's interest rate cut over 25 basis points. The indices witnessed fresh momentum as investor sentiments were lifted by progress in the US-China trade talks and strong earnings. The Shanghai Composite is trading a fraction lower as factory activity in the country contracted for the sixth straight month. South Korea's Kospi is trading at nearly 1% higher. Hong Kong's Hang Seng has also picked up over 1% due to attractive stock valuations. Following the trend, Tokyo's Nikkei 225 has also gained nearly 0.5%. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.